The undisputed queen of political media, Ann Coulter, joins us now. I'm James Poulos. Welcome to Zero Hour. Ann Coulter, you know the name. She's the author of 13 New York Times bestsellers. Today, she manages the unsafe Substack at anncoulter.substack.com. She's been a major media personality for more than 20 years after starting on MSNBC one fine day in July 1996. Welcome, Ann.
So great to be here.
That's awesome. How do you feel? Do you feel like you're on the Titanic as it's going down, or do you feel that our best days are still somewhere out there?
You know, I think there's a normal human instinct to always grasp, even if you're grasping at straws for hope. I thought, just to give you a short history of my hope or lack of hope, when I wrote Adios America in 2015, I thought probably 90% chance the country's over. But it's my country. I love it. 10% chance to save it. I'm going to write this book. So I wrote Adios America and still kind of stayed the same. And then Trump came along using everything that was in Trump, in Adios America, although perhaps a little more aggressively, even than I would have put it. And whoa, he was a runaway hit. And the day he was elected, I thought, I've just flipped. Now I think we have a 90% chance of saving the country. And then, as we all know, he didn't do any of that stuff. So now I'm down to, and with like we've had 20 million more third worlders pour into the country. And historically, they've never left, despite the fact that they are supposed to be, yes, deported when you find them. So I think I'm down to about a 1% chance now, but you really grab on to that 1%.
Yeah, that's a really important 1%. You don't want to be like splitting the bean to make it last through dinner. Yeah, it's been a roller coaster, but the one constant is just more newcomers.
Not just newcomers. I mean, it is expressly third worlders. It is
it's a rainbow coalition.
To wreck our country.
From how many different countries at this point?
Well, not any developed countries.
No.
Not anyone that's going to make our country better.
Yeah.
All people who will make our country worse. And it's, I mean, I suppose you'd have to talk to their psychiatrist to find out what drives this hatred of civilization and the West. But I mean, we're seeing it again. I'm sort of glad that, that October 7th is obviously waking people up and what's going on the universities. But oh my gosh, you haven't noticed until now that there's this band of liberals from George Soros to the college protesters, and just give them the choice, barbarism or civilization. Oh, definitely barbarism. We are for barbarism.
Yeah. Well, so we're back to Trump again, are we?
Apparently.
Apparently so.
I lost a lot of stake bets on that, but my mistake was...
Do you have a 1% hope in Donald Trump at this point?
No, zero.
Zero.
No, all I care about, and for anyone listening, please vote Republican down ballot. That's all I care about. Because I think the presidency will be, I don't care if people get mad at me, but equally bad Biden or Trump. I'll tell you why.
Equally bad. Okay,
I'll put a pin in that. And that's why all I want is divided government. If we can just stay... Don't get anything done for the next 4 years. If we could just get a Republican House or a Republican Senate. So even if you're turned off by both candidates, please, voters. And I think Biden's probably going to win, but who knows? And the reason I don't expect much from either candidate is, I mean, Trump had 4 years. He had a Republican House and a Senate his first 2 years. He obviously does not care. What he does care about, which is kind of hilarious because it'll never happen, is he wants the rich and the New York Times to love him. James, that will never happen. But he doesn't know that.
There's a 1% chance.
It will never happen. Other people can turn. You could become a lib, and the New York Times would like you and get a very nice obituary. Lots of people can turn. Donald Trump could do nothing to get the New York Times to like him, but he will spend 4 years trying because he doesn't face re-election.
So hold on, just to be, are you single issue votering Donald Trump? Is it just like the immigration thing, he screwed it up and so he's dead to you now, or is it any more complicated than that?
Well, immigration, is everything. Okay. It determines, name the issue that doesn't determine. I mean, look what happened to your and my former home state of California. Once they bring in new voters, you lose every single other issue.
Well, but they say he's changed. They say he's learned and he knows how to pick the right people this time.
No, he's a more like souped up, gassed up, high octane version of every Republican when they need our votes. Oh, they're going to get tough on immigration. They're going to do this, that, the other thing. I mean, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, all of them. When they need our votes, they say one thing. Look at Brexit. Look at what happens throughout Europe. I don't know if the prime minister. I think it's the prime minister of Italy, that Meloni woman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's going to throw them all out, and she gets in.
Same deal.
So he's just a more high octane version of every. And I don't know why. When I wrote Adios America. I mean, I give a lot of speeches, or I used to, not so much since COVID. In any event, I love giving speeches, and whatever the topic was du jour that they wanted me to talk about, Obamacare, gun control, like after a mass shooting, I'd always save the last portion of the speech for immigration. And no matter where I was, James, the audience hadn't been primed. They weren't talking about it on Fox News. Oh, they sure weren't. They weren't pushing it in the Wall Street Journal. The crowd would go wild when you got to immigration. I've never seen an issue where the American public is on this side and both Republicans and Democrats are on this side as immigration.
Yeah, okay, so a couple things. If the Republicans suck so bad, why do you want them to have Congress at all?
Oh, because we do have a very strong, tribal politics. So anything the Democrats push, they'll be against, even if it's a good idea. I'm trying to think. There's probably was a good idea they had at one time in the history of the Democratic Party. Well, it's not coming to me. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, that whole sort of E-Verify crowd and sort of a pathway to citizenship. I mean, these guys are still pretty strong in the GOP, right?
The ones who want to E-Verify?
The ones who want to, it's like accountability, but lots of legal immigration. That's the fallback, right? Is they say, oh, no, we don't want the bad kind. We want an infinite amount of the good kind. Only the good kind.
Okay, I'll explain this legal, illegal thing to you. I'm sorry, that sounded very snotty. Let me tell you my opinion on legal, illegal, and why it drives me crazy when Trump, who understands nothing about immigration, says, we want legal immigrants. What people mean when they say that is, because they're thinking of their grandparents, they're thinking of sometimes, I guess, no, pretty much their grandparents, great-grandparents. They're thinking of Ellis Island, these great immigrants, and Albert Einstein. We used to get fantastic immigrants. What they mean is pre-1970 immigrants, before Teddy Kennedy's 1965 Immigration Act, which turned immigration upside down. We used to skim the cream and get the best people from around the world. We also weren't a welfare state, so if you couldn't make it in America, you went home. Of the Ellis Island immigrants, 30% went home. Something like 60% of Southern Italians went home. So we got the best every country had to offer. Post-1970, both because of the way it was written, the chain migration in particular, it switched. Now 90% of even legal immigrants are from the third world. And if anything should wake people up about that, look at the kids on college campuses. Guess what, Mr. Trump? Those are legal immigrants.
Have you talked to him about this?
Did
he give you the time of day?
Well, he hung on my word in 2016, which is why he won. And now he just rips off what I tweet. But no, we haven't spoken since about midway through.
Yeah.
Once he signed the third budget bill with no wall funding.
Yeah.
I was out. That was also when Drudge turned. That was when a lot of people turned.
Well, so I don't know Trump's mind. I don't know Trump's heart. I don't know much about the guy. But I will say that we do hear relatively elaborate intellectual arguments to the effect that well, look, our population is declining and we need to compete with these other guys. And if we don't sort of hoover up more relatively young people who can sort of do stuff and labor and whatever, then America is just going to finish its collapse and shut down. And we're going to be wishing that we had someone else here. What do you say to that?
That's why Africa is the powerhouse it is.
Yeah, because all the people.
Whoa, they have a lot of people and the fertility rate through the roof, and you can't stop them. You got Hollywood, Silicon Valley, you got Africa's Wall Street. No, more people doesn't help. It's the quality of the people.
Yeah, okay. Well, we sort of mined Europe for all the good ones. Is there no one left?
We don't need more people. You need more, and moreover, there are a few things. You don't need more people, even when we're not turning everything over to the robots. If you have fewer people, well, then you need fewer maids, you need fewer gardeners, you need fewer Starbucks baristas. And by the way, Americans would be having more children if they didn't have to pay such high taxes to pay for all of the immigrants, illegal and legal, pay for their, for roads, for schools, for food. They're all on SNAP. All their health care, all the English as a second language classes, all the police offices and ballots that have to be written in 200 different languages. No, the poor middle class is paying for all of these immigrants so the rich can have cheap labor. And they're not going to need the cheap labor anymore because I was just talking, there are all these Silicon Valley guys in Austin where I was over the weekend. Everything, within 5 years, everything is going to be a robot. You don't need the cheap nannies anymore. You don't need the cheap, we're not going to need a lot of truck drivers anymore. Everything is becoming robotic. And at the same time, there will still be things for humans to do, but the economy will obviously move much more toward high-skilled labor. And we're dumping 40 million low-skilled workers on the country. That's nothing but Americans paying welfare to support these people for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, so I don't know about the robots. I think it's still a little too early to tell, but I do think yes, we don't need more people. More people is not automatically a good thing, and especially under the circumstances. Nevertheless, we get this higher order fallback argument, which is well, okay, but we need more people because the Americans that we have now, they're cooked. It's too late for them. It's not just that they don't want to have children, but they can't read. They have no ambition. They're totally unhealthy. Half of them are crazy people. It's a downward spiral. And it would be nice if the middle class of 1985 still existed, but they're done. Most of the rich people are crazy. Most of the poor people have no work. It's over. So we just need to have a blood transfusion.
Our blood transfusion is with HIV-infected blood. That's not going to help the body.
Yeah. Okay. But you think that there's enough of a remnant of American citizens to keep the lights on?
Of course.
Okay.
How did we do it before we had 1/3 of Mexico living here? Did you know that?
Yeah.
1/3 of Mexicans. Do they want any Mexicans in Mexico? We've taken 1/3 of their population. And by the way, they're great workers, love them, fabulous. We have enough Mexican restaurants now. We're okay on Mexican restaurants. And as for the deaths of despair and the ones you're talking about, immigration makes everything easier. A wall makes everything easier. For one thing, that stops the drugs from coming in, and drones aren't going to do it, and the border guards aren't going to do it. A wall stops people from coming in. That doesn't mean you get completely rid of Border Patrol. I suppose you could have drones, but that isn't what stops it. So that's the end of the drugs. You need the wall to stop the drugs from coming in. In part, the deaths of despair. I'd also really tighten up the drug laws and bring back the death penalty. So there are other things that need to be done.
That's pretty tight.
But the wall makes everything easier, especially drugs. And as for other kinds of despair, there are two things to that. We're talking about white males, non-college educated, and a lot of white males, non-college educated, are making more than I am because they are highly skilled plumbers and carpenters. So there are many of them non-college educated that are doing great. But we're talking about the ones that won't be doing great. For one thing, we're living in a country that hates them, absolutely hates them. All you have to hear about, their privilege and we need to genocide whites and end whiteness. And these are college professors saying this. And there's really no pushback even among conservatives. I read this morning, I love them, but I get this little news feed from Daily Caller. I was going to tweet it out and say, you too, Daily Caller. And the big thing is Trump poised to get huge chunk of the black and Hispanic vote. Point one, never gonna happen. Point two, why are Republicans embarrassed to get white votes? What is that weird psychological compulsion that they're embarrassed to get white votes? And it's not only that they're being insulted every place, they're actually, whites and white men in particular, they're actually being openly aggressively discriminated against.
Yeah.
How about we do something about that? Maybe they wouldn't be so depressed.
Yeah, these sad, struggling, downwardly mobile people are the real menace, and they're gonna take over and dominate life any minute now, unless they're stopped. We gotta stop them.
Wait, which downwardly mobile?
Oh, well, this is the argument, right? Is that the worst people in America are these kind of like struggling white people who are being persecuted and pushed to the margins of society, and we have to stop them because they're going to turn into extremists and terrorists. And,
yes,
and
the Klan will rise again. It'll be the new Nazi,
right?
Nazi Minnesota. And the second thing is, because foreign labor is cheaper, often because taxes aren't being paid, and also, you kind of have your worker in a box. He can't go complain if you're not meeting OSHA requirements or whatever. Because they are cheaper, a lot of workforces are heavily dominated by foreign labor, where they don't speak English. They listen to very different music. Apparently, that's a problem on many construction sites. The fight over the boom boxes.
A lot of polka.
Between the black workers and the Hispanic workers.
And
once it goes all polka music, as you say, the black workers leave.
They can't take it.
So if you have a majority, I had a friend who owned the hottest restaurant in Aspen, and all of his workers were illegal. And I was complaining to him about this, and he said, what you often hear the rich using cheap labor say, oh, these white kids, they won't come in, they will skateboard in, and they have their earphones in. And I said, well, you're at Aspen. I think a lot of young kids would love to be a ski bum and work in the hottest restaurant in Aspen, but they're not going to work in a kitchen where they're the only gringo. They're not going to be the one guy there. Once you start moving your workforce, majority cheap foreign labor, who would want to do that? I can't even communicate with the people I'm working with, and they're blasting the polka music.
All right, let me try this out on you. I usually don't quote Steve Saylor. I'm not like a numbers guy. I'm not like a stats guy or whatever.
That's why we need him.
Right? No, he's very quanty, and God bless him. But one thing that I do quote him on as often as I can is he once upon a time described the Cold War as a war for the control of the global left. And I thought that was like so incisive. And so what I want to ask you is...
I've never heard that.
Do you think that's what's really going on with immigration? Where it's like, well, if we don't suck up all these people, then it's going to be a replay of the Cold War. They're all going to become aligned with the Asian baddies. And we're going to have this nightmare on our doorstep because Mexico is going to turn into China, and we're going to have all these communists again, and the cartels are going to, just sort of continue to infiltrate. And so it's going to suck as much as it does now, except it's going to be even worse because the only way that we can win is by gobbling up more of these sort of people who are in danger of going with the communists.
I think that's a crazy fantasy. And I mean... I could as easily say that Mars is going to invade, and they're going to gobble up these hardworking, cheap foreign labor because it's just a fantasy, and there's nothing to support what you've described. I would love for China to take over the third world. I don't think they want it. China definitely doesn't want to nuke us. They need to trade with us. All these fear mongers like Nikki Haley on China, they're not going to bomb us. We owe them a lot of money.
Well, yeah,
they're going to trade with us.
And I'm not
Russia,
definitely going to go to bat for Nikki Haley here, but we do know that the Chinese have been smuggling creepy stuff into our technology, and we do know that they do have the ability to sort of like make our infrastructure crash at this point. And we do know that they're behind all the fentanyl that's flooding in from Mexico.
They absolutely are not. That is completely false.
Really?
They are not one molecule comes from China. Not
okay, this
one.
is. I have not
100%
heard
comes from
this take.
What you're
yet.
talking about was true for
please.
like 3 years, 10 years ago. It has completely switched, and I think it was under a Democrat. It doesn't really matter, but it was under either Obama or Trump. We did what we should do with the other stuff, gave them a strong talking to. We've noticed that our fentanyl, or at least precursors for fentanyl, and some fentanyl is coming from China. You got to step on it. And China has a very aggressive way of enforcing things. Not
so where's it coming from now?
100% from Mexico.
All home.
100%. Yeah. Check with Sam Quinones, the expert on these things. He wrote Dreamland and The Least of Us. And Brookings Institute, there's this woman who does nothing but study, and they were on a panel together. This is in the last few years. Not one molecule comes from China, and Nikki Haley is just very, very stupid. And wants to go to war on 3 continents at once.
She's the worst. But this is literally the first. It's like the Trump meme, like I'm literally hearing this for the first time, that the fentanyl is actually not from China.
You're not assiduously reading my columns then, because I kept attacking Nikki on this.
It's hard to read. It's hard to read things.
And as for the text stealing, yeah, of course we should stamp down on that, but I don't know why that means. I know, let's wreck our country by turning ourselves into Uganda.
Yeah.
That'll teach them. What's the point of that?
Well, I think a lot of people really believe that if you get a large group of people into America, they will just turn into Americans within a generation or two, because that's what they grew up with that experience.
Yeah, they were different people.
Yeah.
We had wild diversity like Germans and Scandinavians. Anyway, and pre-1970 immigrants, because there was no welfare state, they were more educated, bought more houses, made more money. It is completely the reverse since 1970. But wait, there was one thing you said I wanted to respond to. What was it?
China, fentanyl, cartels.
China, they want to bring more
Nikki
people
Haley.
in. Oh, yeah. You said the third world immigrants who, are shocked, blown away at the sight of a flush toilet. They and their offspring are going to suddenly be, Elon Musk. No.
Hey, he's African.
Yeah. I notice whenever they're pushing the great immigrants we have, they're pushing a lot of immigrants that look an awful lot alike.
Yes.
Peter Thiel, the Sergey Brin, Elon Musk, people who would be discriminated against applying to Harvard today. But if it works just to come to America and, oh my gosh, suddenly someone who's illiterate in his own language, not to mention ours, is creating new computer systems, well, then we would never, ever need to go to war. We could just bring all the Iraqis here, dunk them in the Rio Grande. A miracle! You're Thomas Jefferson. We're sending you home now.
Yeah, it's like baptism. Boom! You're now American. Okay, so talk to me about the cartels then, because we haven't gotten there yet. They're there. They're not going away. They're getting stronger. Yeah, they fight amongst themselves sometimes, but it's pretty bad, and the infiltration is ongoing. And you've got Donald J. Trump. We're going to take care of them. You'll see even guys in Congress. We need to go to war. We got to get the Marines, send the Marines down there. What should we do?
Obviously, the cartels in Mexico are actually killing Americans as opposed to Russians, as opposed to China, as opposed to anybody in the Middle East, at least until the terrorists Biden let in, until they start acting up, get a little frisky. The cartels, the immigrants from South America are killing multiple million more Americans than any of these countries that the State Department and my own Republican Party, these crazy warmongers, they think it sounds so macho. And I've been to Lindsey Graham, oh my gosh, she's the worst. And I've been to Iraq 7 times in the last year. Yeah, who cares? Who cares? That affects no American's life. What affects Americans' life, and forget the cartels, forget the drug overdoses, they're still killing, I forget what it is, but I think it's about 8 Americans a day. And that's forgetting the drug overdoses. About 8 Americans a day. How many Americans a day is, I don't know, or even Palestinians killing? Okay, they have our hostages. That's a big deal. Hamas isn't killing as many Americans as Mexican cartels, which operating in cooperation with the Mexican government.
Indeed, right?
So, I'm sorry, there's only one war any American should have any interest in, and that is on Mexico and the cartels. And I think the only one who would wage it, at least I'm sure there are a few great guys in Congress. And with the caveat that don't believe what they say, we're going to have to wait and see. Is it going to be another Trump, another Boris Epstein? I'm not Epstein,
Johnson,
thank you. Is Ron DeSantis. I think he actually would stage a military intervention against the cartels and build a wall.
What do you think is going to happen to him?
Well, first, what happened to him, and I hope I'm right about this, I think his Achilles heel, the biggest problem with him was his 20-point victory in a year Republicans were wiped out thanks to Donald Trump. That was the red wave year that never happened. It ended up being a blue wave, except the blessed state of Florida. And that made him, anybody who would run for president, probably anybody who has the impressive educational credentials he has, ought to be arrogant. But I think it made him too arrogant. He wouldn't listen to anybody. He absolutely wouldn't listen to anybody. And instead of talking about immigration, crime, and how, he can't brag too much, but how he was the only one who got COVID right. He and the president of Sweden. No one could beat him in this country on that. He listened to the great Barrington Declaration guys, and he did everything right. Yeah. And he's been fantastic on immigration. In a state where the big interests are hospitality, the two biggest ones, hospitality and agriculture. Guess who needs a lot of cheap foreign labor? And
yeah,
he was
you
still
can't run on anti-Mexico policy as a Floridian
running
for the White House.
He did, and he won.
Well, for
by
governor,
20
for
points.
Governor, yes. But then if he's trying to,
my point is, he's brave. He did it because he believes it. And I haven't seen hospitality collapsing. I haven't seen agriculture collapsing. I'm sick of farmers insisting on. No, we insist on farming as we did in 1870. Have you heard of robotics? Do you know there's a robot that can pick strawberries? It has like 3 little cameras, gets it when it's exactly right, has a clamp that pulls it off. But none of them will do it because the rest of them aren't, I suppose the rest of them aren't being forced to do it. So their competitors are just using the cheap foreign labor being subsidized by the middle class. Force them to mechanize.
Yeah, and this is big ag we're talking about. These people aren't hurting. They have resources.
But anyway, DeSantis should have talked, and he's been fantastic on crime. You notice there were no BLM riots in Florida in 2020. So he should have talked about nothing but immigration, crime, and COVID. And instead, he's like wandering off on and school choice and abortion and term limits and digital currency. And I'm not saying these are unimportant. Name the issues Ronald Reagan ran on. You can run on 2 or 3 issues. Just stick to your issues. But the main reason I think he went no place, but he should have done better than Nikki Haley. That's embarrassing. The reason I lost my stake bets on Trump not being the nominee is Trump is basically the incumbent, and the incumbent always wins. I thought it was the 2020 election where voters were really smart and you could trust them. We got a red wave, but we didn't get Trump. No, this was 1992 when we could have had Pat Buchanan and ended up with the loser incumbent first George Bush.
Okay, well let's keep building this out. So build the wall. I assume do the deportations, mass deportations, war with the cartels, and so that means war with the Mexican government. Yes.
We're at war with the Russian government.
Well,
no big deal.
There's war and there's war here.
No big deal. We're about to start World War III.
Yeah, I know. But if you're going to really take it to the cartels, and as a result, you got to take it to the Mexican government. You're rolling troops in over the border, right?
I don't know, maybe. I'm not a military strategist, but I think we should take the threat from Mexico. My point is that is a threat to us. That is a country that is killing Americans today, right now. Americans will die because of that country on our border, and the politicians could not care less. could not care less. Wither Saudi Arabia. What are we going to do in Iraq? How about Afghanistan? Let's install a government there. This affects, and I was a big fan of Iraq and Afghanistan when we went in, but no one told me, and we're going to hang out for 20 years and paint George Floyd murals.
Yes.
That wasn't the plan.
What do you make of, because there's a lot of talk. There's always a lot of talk about immigration, and it's an easy issue to demagogue and do nothing about.
Actually, I think there has not always been a lot of talk, only since Trump. I will give him credit for that.
Sure, okay. But, but even, I mean, we went through this with Reagan where it was like, oh, this is really bad, what do we do? And then it was like, well, we just say okay, and then it's like, all right, but never again. And then it started getting bad in the 90s again, and there's, I mean, we've seen this kind of pattern happen in the GOP before, where it's like, oh, great, a hot button issue that we can demagogue and then do nothing about. And then if you keep everyone's mind on that, then they won't be focusing on all these other things that we're not doing.
Right.
What is going to stop that cycle? If anything.
I'll take New York City as my example. For years, decades, as the streets ran with blood, we would have mayoral candidates like Ed Koch, who would, denounce criminals, would denounce the New York Times, denounce liberals. He did, like Eric Adams today. He talked a good game, and he didn't do anything. And it was a dangerous, scary, dystopian place. Not as bad as it is now, by the way. But for decades. And then all it took was one guy coming in and actually doing it. One guy. And I'm very sorry that he's lost his mind. But Rudy Giuliani saved the greatest city in the world. And I think that's what we need for the country. Yeah, Trump, I'd still write, you haven't, like so many do, made fun of me for writing "In Trump We Trust" when I hate him with a hot, hot hate of 1,000 suns right now for not doing any of it. But I would write it again because nobody was talking about immigration. It was the same old nonsense. They all attacked him when he said the things he was going to do. The wall was racist. Deporting illegals was racist. Ending anchor babies was racist. Blocking Muslims from terrorist countries, oh, that was racist. And then he wins. And now we have Republicans claiming they're going to do it, but I don't know, maybe they learned from Trump. Oh, don't worry, you just say you're going to do this stuff and then don't do any of it. But we just need one guy to come in and actually do it. Sadly, I do think that that guy is Ron DeSantis. Maybe not sadly, but he's got to get his game up and stop wandering off on 6-week abortion bans when what we need is a wall.
Well, in the meantime, we've got governors, and Florida's just kind of sticking out there. It's not really ground zero. We're here in Texas. How about Governor Abbott? He put the gators back in the river. And what do you think's going on at the border in Texas?
He's doing a good job. He's doing a very good job on immigration. I wouldn't want him to be our nominee. I think a lot of what he's doing, I'm not sure how to put this, but even as I recall, and maybe I'm wrong about this, it was DeSantis who first started talking about sending immigrants to other states. We don't get in Florida. There aren't as many, illegals, obviously, not on the border. That Martha's Vineyard stunt, the greatest political stunt of my lifetime. I wish he would do more, but I'm not sure we have enough to keep sending them. But I think a lot of the things Abbott does is, and I don't want to be too unfair to him because he is doing a pretty great job, is a little bit of a Me Too with DeSantis. But I think DeSantis is the ideas guy. And like I say, he was courageous enough to push through E-Verify in a state standing up to the industries who don't care about what happens to the country as long as they can make another buck. And DeSantis, as governor, stood up to them. I think, and he understands how it works. I mean, one of the things, and I'm sorry I'm rambling, but one of the things that is so enraging about Trump, he never understood taxing remittances. He never understood that. You could explain it to him 1,000,000 times, and he never understood it. And he could have done that day one. It was 100% within the capability of the Treasury Department. Well, you hear DeSantis talk about it. He understands everything. He understood COVID when nobody else did. He understands how to get everything done. And he is boy, they want to demagogue and demonize him in the media because they know he's a threat. But no, he's a nerd. I don't think nerds are threatening to soccer moms.
No, usually not. Well, what you say is true about the sort of DeSantis Abbott dance, and it's been a couple years now where it's kind of this running joke where it's like, if you want Abbott to do something, just get DeSantis to do it and wait like 6 to 9 months, and then
I'm
it'll be
so
done.
glad.
No, it's not. It's not
I
just
didn't
you.
know that.
No, this is real. And I'm not saying this to denigrate or make fun of anyone, because you kind of want that optionality in like the federal system where you have one guy who's just kind of like driving everything, and then the other guy who's like not laundering it exactly, but kind of imitating it in a way that is not as maybe as hard-edged, but still gets the job done. And that's what I thought was going to happen with Abbott and immigration, where he's like, look, I'm defying the feds. This is the way it's going to be. It's a national emergency. I'm taking it seriously. It's a state emergency. And you start getting all these other states going like, we're with you.
Yes.
We're going to contribute. We're going to send some troops. And it all just kind of melted away.
Did it?
Kinda. I was thinking that maybe this was going to be sort of like the coalition of states that actually take things seriously, and they're going to start coordinating on policy and stuff.
Aren't states still sending their National Guards?
There's a bit, there's a bit.
I guess I haven't followed it to this point. I thought it was still happening.
Well, it's not officially over. They didn't have a goodbye, a wrap party,
I mean, I guess there's a limit. Do states have to... Are they all going to have to send their National Guard troops until DeSantis becomes president?
This is the question, is like, what's it going to take to actually get a critical mass of people here, whether it's states or governors or just straight up citizens? Where do you think that tipping point is, where it's finally going to be enough that it starts getting traction?
Well, I think it's enough now with the voters. It is with our rulers. And I mean, maybe there's another way, but I think all it takes is one Giuliani at the federal level, one guy who will actually not just talk like Mayor Koch and Mayor Adams do. No, we don't want to just hear this stuff. You have to actually do it. And there may be other governors, but I think DeSantis is that man. Yeah,
well, it's interesting. I'm not a Trump whisperer. I can't make representations about what's going on in the guy's head. I'm sure he's learned a lot from his experiences. He's definitely seems to be taking better care of himself. Story for another day.
Okay, now I want him to win. I'll take bets on that.
All right. I mean, what I think is interesting is, DeSantis really got kind of really beaten down over the course of that primary that wasn't. A lot of people were wishing that he had just waited one more cycle.
No, I don't think so. I think he blew it and the farther we get, I would never have said this when he was running because I wanted him to win so much. I think there were a lot of stupid things he did in that campaign.
Yeah.
And I know people were telling him not to do that. And one was, which I remember thinking at the time when I heard this, man, this is stupid. Didn't you go to Harvard and Yale? Anyway, his plan...
Not what they used to be, I've been told.
Right. Well, it was good when he went there.
Yeah.
His plan was to follow the Ted Cruz path and really suck up to the evangelicals. And that's why 6-week abortion ban, which, by the way, I'm a pro-life zealot. Whoa, are we losing on that? But put that aside. So I'm sorry, you're going to follow the plan of a guy. Can we discuss this at the Ted Cruz Presidential Museum? Can we see if that's a good path to follow? And also, I think a mistake a lot of humans make, not just politicians. I believe it's called, being a little too solipsistic, generalizing wildly from your own experience. Because DeSantis and his wife have young children, they think that's the entire voting populace. I looked this up because it was driving me crazy, all this stuff about mothers and little kids and schools. Hey, could you get back to immigration and crime? At most, 20% of the voting population has children under the age of 18. So that's great. Just concentrate on that 20% that are going to vote for you anyway. So that was dumb. And personally, I think he's continuing this. I think this is a mistake. I mean, it's a small mistake, not a big deal. I'm still his #1 fan. Republicans do this all the time, and that's these tax breaks, tax benefits based on behavior.
Yeah.
No, taxes are to raise revenue.
Yeah.
And now I saw he just pushed through, no taxes for back to school supplies. And one of the first things he did, no taxes or lower taxes for like diapers. No, Democrats are going to come in and it's going to be no taxes if you recycle.
Yeah.
Stop this crap. Just tax us, get the revenue you want, and don't use it to change our behavior.
Well, the Treasury and the Fed have just blown that up. I mean, they've got this magic money printer, and they're going to use it until the Earth's core melts down. And so when all of this money is coming from nowhere and going everywhere, then what does it even mean to have taxes? What does a revenue even mean? It's a drop in this bucket of play money. Anyway, where I'm going with this DeSantis thing is it looked like he maybe destroyed his political career by bungling this presidential run. But he's back in Florida, he's still doing stuff, and he might, if for whatever reason Trump doesn't make it back into the White House, he might actually still be the guy who's in the best shape to run next time around.
Yes.
Which would be weird.
I'm hoping so. I would think so. I mean, who else is there?
I sometimes hear that even Abbott himself is considering.
DeSantis, I think, will. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but from what we just said about Abbott.
Yeah. Well, DeSantis is in this very interesting position. He's like still quite young. Florida's still doing quite well. I think he seems to maybe be like making up with Trump a little bit and might even like come out and say something about that. And if he does that, he would be positioned if Trump can't make it work. I mean, next time around, Trump will be too old regardless of anything. DeSantis would be able to position himself probably as the only person around who has some claim to being kind of MAGA-y and also not being Trump.
He is MAGA, but he actually follows through, unlike Trump. And I mean, I can tell you right now.
But there would be a Trump world person who would say, "Over my dead body," and run.
What, Laura Loomer? Anyway, I can warn you right now. And look, always, even at the moment I hated Trump the most, I've always loved Trump supporters. I see the Trump flag on the side of a barn or a flag on a boat or something and think, okay, these are my people. I love Trump supporters. A lot of them are very mad at me. You will get a lot of attacks for allowing me to say anything critical of him. Yeah. And I mean, I understand that because, for one thing, the way they're going after Trump, they might even get me to vote for him. I wish we could put him and his entire family, especially Jared Kushner, in prison for life. You can't. They got nothing on him. Not one of these lawsuits or prosecution, not one is legitimate. The only one that actually even describes anything that is a crime, and it is a crime, not responding to the subpoena to return the classified documents, not complying with the subpoena. That is a serious offense.
You're supposed to do that, yeah.
Because you can't have a legal system if people just blow off subpoenas.
Right.
I've spent a lot of time doing document productions for a law firm in New York, and you're warned. If you don't produce something that is responsive, the whole law firm goes to prison because you can't have a court system.
But this is what happens when you start waging lawfare and just prostituting the law and bending it to political purposes, is people start saying no.
Well, I would think, having said that the one crime was the Mar-a-Lago documents, still, is it worse than what Hillary Clinton did? It is worse than what Biden did, but not by enough that make them pay a fine, come get the documents and move on.
Worse than what Biden got caught doing.
Right. This is just fair. But so the media seems to be doing everything they can to make us really hate them and punish them by voting for Trump. And they've always hated the Trump supporters. I mean, whenever I talk to one of these Trump supporters, a normal one, not part of the cult, and they ask me why I don't like him, they don't know. They just don't know that he could have ended anchor babies like that, that he had the Republican Congress, that there were people he could bring in. I mean, I just feel like the people who hate me for this, I still love them, but the fact that they're the ones that are going to be screwed when Trump doesn't fulfill his promises is kind of a silver lining here. I'm trying to save your lives, your jobs. I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
Cheap labor is great for me. But I feel like they're And for years, it felt like, they're drowning. And Trump is the one piece of flotsam they can hold on to. And I can see that the flotsam is wormholed.
Well, you're certainly right that you gotta love the haters. But I'm still trying to figure out, why do you think he just didn't get it done?
I don't think he cares. And by the way, if you read In Trump We Trust, I would absolutely still write it.
Because of the Taco Bowl and everything, he just wants more fans and he thinks he can make them out of
Taco Bowl thing was hilarious. 2016 campaign was much better. I think he was funnier. He was on point. Now I think even he has some modicum of shame making the exact same promises he made in 2016. Wait a second. Didn't you say that and then you were president?
Continue to keep trying to make America stay like it used to be great one time again, I think is the, yeah. Well, it's tough. I mean, I don't know.
But I was clear in that book that he's an awful person. I mean, personally, he's an Araviste and utterly tacky and a vulgarian and so on and so forth. But he was
very
the only
American.
But no, I don't think so. Very tacky New York. But it wasn't just the wall. That obviously was the biggest thing. It was what was chanted at every rally. But there was also bringing manufacturing home. There was also not getting us involved in foreign wars and, in fact, ending the war in Afghanistan, which, footnote, didn't do. There was also ending the carried interest loophole, which no other presidential, and I praise, this is a big thing in Adios America, okay, it's just a chapter, but no other politician would say that. Kasich attacked him for it on the stage. Yeah. It's an utterly unfair tax loophole for very rich people. But then he hires, half of Goldman Sachs, and Gary Cohn in the White House, Kushner's friend, says, oh, no, it's good for investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he didn't keep any of his promises to the typical Trump voter, to the people. He was sucking up to Wall Street. He was sucking up to the New York Times. He was sucking up to people who hate him.
Okay, well, you said that he's not doing all this stuff because he doesn't care, and the mystery is why. And it seems like your answer is, well, because he really wants to please Wall Street instead.
Not just Wall Street, New York Times, fancy people on Fifth Avenue.
He wants to be Mr. New York.
Which will never happen.
Well, I mean, he got Rudy, so that's pretty New Yorky, right?
Yes, and what wonderful things he did for Rudy.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, hasn't he been spurned enough at this point to have a change of heart? He's got millions of fans. He fills stadiums. Who cares what the New York Times thinks? Who cares what?
Well, you and I are normal people. I don't need millions of people in a stadium to say who cares what the New York Times thinks.
I don't know. I mean, I wrote something for the New York Times once. They got a few good eggs in there.
Oh, I'm their most loyal reader, but it's mostly for content.
Yeah, that's right. They're still,
when they're good, they're still very good.
Yeah. Okay. So Donald Trump still more a New Yorker than an American is almost what I'm hearing.
No. He's a very unusual and preposterous creature. I stick with, he's a high-octane version of Mitch McConnell. Promise you the world, and betray you when you get elected.
Well, if that were true, and like I said, I couldn't possibly comment. If that were true, it would break many people's brains, and you know what? It would also break their hearts, and then what would happen?
I don't think it did, because if you've ever dealt with a fanatic, I was just talking about this at dinner. Someone else was bringing it up. Someone who thinks, he was telling us about cognitive dissonance in this article he had read about some group that was sure when a comet came through, and this wasn't the Heaven's Gate people, but when a comet came through, that was going to be the end of the world. Mm-hmm. And so they all gathered for their end of the world. And I don't know, the reporter went to investigate. Okay, will they change their minds when the comet comes through and the world doesn't end? Guess what the answer is? Nope. They just come up with a rationalization. Zealots are like that. He didn't. Oh, and how about guns? How about guns? He was great on guns when he was running in 2016. Remember that videoed press conference with the Democrats where he gave away our gun rights and said guns should be taken away without due process? So you explain it.
Well, I think there's always some willingness to re-rationalize and say like, oh, the Mayan calendar, we just did the calculations slightly off. There's always that. But I think for a lot of people, it's just like we do not have another choice. There's no other option. There's no fallback. If we don't get Trump back in there, it's done.
Well, I think it's done either way. But I don't disagree with what I don't disagree with that. It is a binary choice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, does he have a chance? You think he's a 0% chance, but
No. I used to think he had a 0% chance.
So you're recalculating the Mayan
No,
calendar.
in the last few months, mostly because of, I mean, things like the hush money trial. It's just so outrageous what they're doing to him just to punish the people who are doing this third world nonsense. You kind of want to vote for him.
Yeah. I mean, since when is it illegal to pay someone to stop talking?
Well, also, I mean, what was really going on there is she was trying to extort him for money. She's the one who should be on trial here.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And the campaign finance, are you kidding me?
So Biden's maybe going to get Trump elected. Think they'll let him in?
Not so much Biden, but his allies in the media.
Biden meaning this
The
sort of
media, the
apparatus,
prosecutors, the Trump haters.
this robotic octopus that moves Joe Biden around from one place.
If they were smart, they wouldn't do this. And I think there are probably some Democrats, some smart Democrats, who know, oh man, this is a disaster, this hush money trial. If we could just shut down MSNBC, we could win this election. But the haters, I had a bet with a friend of mine who said they're going to figure this out and they're just going to be very quiet, let Trump go out, make crazy statements. And I said, no, they can't help themselves, even if they know it's hurting them and it's going to help get Trump elected. They hate him so much they can't stop themselves.
No, I mean, it's also sort of like too late for them to turn around and go back. You got another one of these kind of Mr. New York guys, Jamie Dimon, out there, and he's already he's gone on record saying like, well, we were too harsh on him, and I don't know, maybe. And there is the beginning. I don't know, maybe it's more advanced than that. I don't have eyes on Wall Street like some people, but there is a shift in sentiment on and around Wall Street. And even among people who are like, sort of publicly out there, like, well, I mean, Jamie Dimon again, like, oh, yeah, diversity, but for like qualified people,
Right.
Diverse and qualified. And I think was it Chris Rufo or somebody just kind of dismantled him, and it was a nice, embarrassing moment.
Dismantled Diamond?
Yeah. Sort
I
of
love
like,
Diamond.
calling him.
I think he's very unusual. He
because
often says
he wanted to have
things.
it both ways on sort of diversity and competence, and he was like, no, we don't have to choose, and like I want the best people and the most diverse people, and so, but he's one of these guys who's, at the same time he's trying to have it both ways on that. It also looks like he's trying to open up the aperture a little bit on saying like, Trump isn't the devil, and if he came back, maybe
I think he sounded like he was going to vote for him.
Yeah.
No, but he's always been a rare voice of common sense. Remember, he was the first one, I loved him for this, a few months, it was the summer of COVID, saying, okay, that's it, this is nonsense, you're coming back to the office.
Yeah, before it's too late, before you
and
lose those
he did say
millennials.
something good about Trump. He said the economy was way better, and it sounded like he would vote for him, I don't know. And the having it both ways, still, yes, it might be logically insane, but at least he said, I want competence. That is like earth-shattering in today's world.
Yes, that is now a litmus test of its own, which is terrifying in its own right. Okay, so maybe they fail to ensure that Trump is his own worst enemy on the campaign trail. Maybe November comes around. Probably November comes around. Maybe he wins. Do they let him back in?
Actually, that's a really good question because they, Democrats, the left, gigantic cheaters.
Yeah. They
They have contested every election, every presidential election they lost, unless we won it in a landslide, we Republicans. It's unbelievable to me, that guy, what's his name, the Maryland guy who's always on MSNBC, led the impeachment.
Yeah, I'm not really watching the MSNBC these days. They have all those guys on.
This is going to drive me crazy. No, it's a really big name. He's like the face of the Democratic Party in Congress. Anyway, he objected to Trump's election in 2016 the same way he wanted to send it back to send it back to the Senate, and then we send these electors back to the states. The exact same thing. I think Maxine Waters does it every 4 years, or any elections they lose. They had that, I mean, even back to 1980, when Reagan beat Carter, and I wrote about this in one of my books. It was the craziest crackpot story. Once you get into it, they had this huge conspiracy that took up 2/3 of the New York Times op-ed page of how Reagan had struck a deal with the Ayatollah to hold the hostages until the end of the Carter administration. Gary Sick was pushing it. He was a Columbia professor. The Congress spent multiple millions of dollars investigating this. Why? Because Reagan won, and it was pretty big, but it wasn't quite a landslide. They didn't have anything like that for 84. But every year Democrats lose. They have done this forever. And in defense of Republicans, I mean, yes, Democrats cheat. There weren't enough stolen votes to change the election. Yes, and it should have been dropped much sooner, which I suppose is my main point. Even if you've been stolen from, you should never contest an election. Makes you look like a sore loser. You're going to lose the next time around. Be gracious, come back and fight another day.
You remember those sore loserman bumper stickers? It was like Gore, Lieberman, and that's what they changed.
Yes.
Yeah, that stuff sticks.
Yes, it does. And John Thune had an election stolen from him. He graciously let it go, came back and beat the Senate Majority Leader, which I think it was the first time in history. Anyway, in defense of Republicans who were suspicious of the election results, the 2020 election was unlike any other election in history. We had those stupid COVID rules where Democrats had 6 months to go to nursing homes, fill out the ballots for them, carry their voters on gurneys to the polling place.
Just drop it in the mailbox so people don't die.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're going to change the voting rules, like voting in a presidential election has never been done in the history of the country, either side that lost in a close election was going to scream bloody murder. 100% the Democrats would have. But you have to let it go. And I'm sorry, there have been enough investigations now. Arizona in particular, the election was not stolen.
All right, we got a few minutes here. I can't let you go without talking about RFK, Mr. Brainworms himself. That one I did not see coming, but it definitely brightened up my feed. So, this is a guy who you go back and you look at the prior years, and sometimes it only takes 5% to totally tip it one way or the other. What do you think? Is he going to have that kind of impact?
On one hand, I've been saying, positions change depending what's going on the ground. I've been saying that if there was ever a year a third-party candidate could do well, this would be it. Because it's like both sides are trying to lose. I don't think that's true. I think, you can laugh at me when I'm totally wrong on this, but I think it will probably have the same effect as always. I think the third party vote won't be that much bigger than usual, maybe a little bit, because the left so hates Trump, and there's just going to be so much intensity around this election. You're not going to have people thinking, I'll vote third party.
Right. Yeah, it's not like the Nader days when it was like, they're kind of the same.
Right.
Although they are kind of the same in some ways. But in some ways they're not.
But the hates maybe I guess to be fair, I should say both sides, but not really both sides. Mostly their side, and then our side reacting to their hate. Yeah. I think there will be so much intense feeling around the election, no one will waste a vote.
Yeah. You're writing the Substack. Is there a book on the way, number 14?
I don't think so. I think I have finally said everything I have to say.
Wow.
I think people
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I think people don't read books as much. We have much faster, and the Substack takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of fun. Almost everything is free on it. I do videos about once a week with interesting people. I had my friend Peter Thiel explain, which he's told me many times over dinner, but I said I really wanted him to tell the whole full story of how he took down Gawker. And that was fantastic. I have a really good one coming up on Well, I've lots of great interviews. Mostly, I try to get people I'll argue with. I like arguing; it's fun.
Yeah.
You learn stuff, and then I just randomly send stuff out. Yesterday, did you see this? I'm sorry, we're probably totally going over. But there's, the anti-Semitism is totally coming from the left now. I really hope this is waking people up. You had the BLM tweet, Chicago tweet right after October 7th. All these left-wing professors, all the left-wing and immigrant, just saying horrible things, doing horrible things, violence. New York Times runs an article yesterday saying, basically, yeah, you think this is bad? How about right-wing tropes?
Yeah, the tropes, man. Watch out.
Ruling class.
Yeah, dude.
Global elite. Those are apparently, as bad as slaughtering 700 Israelis.
Yep, putting them right into the oven. It's terrible. Well, you answered my last question, which was fun. Can we get it back? You're having a good time. I'm having a good time with you. We are now out of time. So, Ann Coulter, the one and only, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, and it's good to see you again, James.
Absolutely. Come back next time.
I'd love to.
Alrighty. That's all the time. Meanwhile, that we have until next time. So if you want to become a Blaze TV subscriber and help us create more content just like this, go to blazetv.com. Use the code 0hour20 for $20 off your first year of Blaze TV. This is 0 Hour. I'm James Poulos, and may God have mercy on us all.